Hello, so in this class of cloud computing, today we will hear study about the various cloud computing technologies. Now, there are certain technologies here which are working behind the cloud computing platform. The technologies which are making the cloud platform here flexible, reliable, and usable technology. So the various technologies which are here supporting, or we can say that enabling the cloud computing are here like your virtualization, your grid computing, utility computing, etc. So we're going to study here about the various cloud computing enabling technologies here. So the very first one and the most important here is the virtualization. So it should be firstly clear that virtualization and cloud computing here are two different technologies because virtualization here is used to enable the cloud computing platform. So now we will define here that what virtualization here refers to. So basically virtualization here refers to creating an instance of something which is virtual rather than creating something which is real. That means we are here creating virtual instances of hardware, softwares, your database storage. So basically, so virtualization can be regarded here as a technology which is your hardware reducing and cost effective system. Now, because we have to deploy this cloud computing here at a massive scale, so that means there should be some technology here which helps us to uh, make the system effective. So with the help of virtualization, we can create here the various virtual instances of your hardware. That means various virtual machines which act as real devices. So these are basically the instances of these hardwares and these softwares. Now, if we just talk about the distributed servers of the cloud computing, so what we can do there, we can use there the server virtualization. So this is an important technology which here enables the cloud computing platform. So if we just talk about the various infrastructure model of the cloud computing technology. So we just talked about the IaaS model, which was your infrastructure as a service. So infrastructure as a service basically here deals with providing the architecture or the network architect here for your cloud computing platform. So that means in that layer here in this model here what we are using, we have to use the various uh, hardwares, various machines here. So virtualization here is enabled in this model. That means we're using here the word concept of virtualization in your infrastructure as a service. So there are certain benefits here with your virtualization technique, as we're saying that it is virtualization basically refers to creating a virtual instance of something rather than actual. So, due to this technique, it becomes a hardware reducing and cost effective technique here for a cloud computing platform. So, this is basically simply the separation of the operating system from the hardware. In your virtualization, we talk here about the separation of your operating system from the hardware. It means they're not dependent, they're not binded. And if you just talk here about the cloud computing, which is a way much bigger term than your virtualization. So cloud computing is the separation of operating system hardware and the application. So it is including here applications also. That means applications are also not bounded here to your operating systems and to your hardware. But to enable the separation of operating system and hardware, we have to employ virtualization for enabling the cloud computing technology. So here's a simple example here for virtualization is like on one system you're using like both Windows and Linux. Like if you want to use two different operating systems, so you would have to have two different hardware also. So that means it would be always increasing the number of hardware. But with the help of this virtualizations, we can run multiple instances of such kind of operating systems on your one system here. So if you just here see a differentiation between like what you have when you don't use virtualization and what happens when virtualization here is enabled. So So what will happen in this case? You will have, if you have single device, you will have single operating system. So that means the various applications here are running on this operating systems because the hardware and the software here are tightly bound and the complete architecture of the system also. But here you will have one device. But rather than that, you will have here a virtualization layer. Now you have here the host operating systems also, but you can have here the other operating systems also. That means the instance of these operating systems. So these instance of these operating systems works like some another real machines. That means for one instance, if you're using Linux, it will appear that completely this is one system. Add some another instant if you want to use Windows 7, so that will appear a separate machine. So these are here referred as your virtual machines. That means running different instances and totally separate from each other. That means now the applications which will be here running on these operating systems, they will be also virtually different from each other. So this is an advantage that here the complexity of the system is also reduced because number of applications just running on the one applications, it just basically slow down the system here. So that makes the virtualization here a very important concept in your cloud computing. So basically what we can have in one host machine or one host operating system which can enable these guest machines. So these guest machines are basically here referred as the virtual machines. So in your cloud infrastructure, when we have the infrastructure as a service, what we're doing, we're creating various physical instances of these virtual machines so that they can be shared here by the different tenants for a particular organization here. So, in cloud computing, this virtualization is a technique which allows to share single physical instance of an application or resource among the various tenants or multiple tenants. So, this allow here the sharing of an instance or an application among multiple tenants. Now, how it will be done here? So, it is done by assigning a logical name to that physical resource and then providing a pointer to that physical resource when demanded. So that means it can be shared. This is a pool of resource which could be here shared by a number of users, or we can say number of tenants here, because each of that instance here will be virtually separated from each other. To each tenant it will appear as a different hardware, a different machine here. So what we have here is like this. So like we have the network here and storage. Then we have the virtual infrastructure like this. So this is basically a virtualization model here for your cloud computing. So we have virtual infrastructure here. Now, here you will have a different virtual machines like this. Now, these will have the operating systems and the applications. So this is just the model here for the virtualization model here for enabling your cloud computing technology, that we have this virtual infrastructure here, which will be provided here as the infrastructure as a service in your cloud model. And then we have a different number of virtual machines running different operating systems and the required applications. So this architecture here of virtualization offers virtual isolation among the various tenants, that means the various users, and therefore the organizations can use and customize the application as each of them have, or each of them is running as a different instance. So this is just a virtual infrastructure here for your cloud computing. So we have different kind of virtualization here, like your hardware virtualization for like this, creating the virtual machines. Then we have the server virtualization, that means for enabling different kind of servers here. Instead of using all the real ones, we can have the instance of those particular servers. And then we have application virtualization and like desktop virtualization also. So we will be studying here about the various virtualization concepts of cloud computing in detail in our next session. So we have various virtualization layer here, enabling these technologies like your VM hypervisor, VMW layer, or like your VirtualBox, etc. So this is the first cloud computing technology here, which is your virtualization. Now, after virtualization, the next one which we have is SOA, which is your service-oriented architecture. Now, the next one is service-oriented architecture. Now, a service-oriented architecture, what happens? It helps to use the applications as a service. It does what it does. It helps us to use the applications as a service for other applications also, regardless the type of the vendor, product, or the technology. So that means it helps, or it is possible to exchange the data between applications of different vendors without any additional changes here. So this is called a service-oriented architecture. So this architecture basically, if you have different number of applications, so these will be here provided as service to the user. So that means a huge amount of data here can be exchanged between the various organizations here. And it is independent here of the product, vendor, or the technology. Now, after that, we have the concept of grid computing here. Grid computing. So what happens? This grid computing also refers to a distributed computing. So this is also a distributed computing format in which a group of computers from multiple locations are connected with each other to achieve a common objective. So first of all, this is called as a distributed computing. Distributed computing, because what happens here, the different number of computers or multiple computers which are located here at different locations, they will be connected to each other to achieve the common objective. So that means this technology here is breaking the complex task into smaller pieces. Now, these smaller pieces in which we're breaking the task, these pieces are distributed to the CPU that resides within the grid here. So, like how this distribution is done here, for example, if this is grid computing. So what you have the division like databases, the various, no, these are the various entities which are here distributed. Now these will also be distributed here like your laptops. So it is basically dividing the various units so that they can achieve the common objective. But the smaller pieces which are distributed here, uh, at, the smaller pieces are distributed to the CPUs that resides within this grid here. So this is the third technology here which we are using in the cloud computing platform, virtualization, then the service oriented architecture, and then we have the concept of grid computing, which is also like your distributed computing. It means the different number of multiple computers at different locations are working to achieve a common objective. Now, another one which we have here is the utility computing. So what about utility computing? Utility computing is simply based on the principle of pay per use, or basically it is a pay per use model. That means you have to pay according to the usage. So basically this kind of computing allows the service providers, that means service providers here makes the computing resources, various kind of resources available to the customers according to the requirements, and depending upon the usage they are charged according to that. That's why it's pay per use model. According to your requirements, the resources are provided here by the providers, and then you are charged according to that. So various companies like your IBM, HP, they have been working on the concept of like utility computing here. So basically, this utility computing here offers computational resources on demand, because we're saying that cloud computing here is a self on demand service. So that's how it's based on such kind of technologies like your utility computing. On demand, you are requesting for the services, and then according to that, you are charged for that. So this technique here, utility computing here, makes it as on demand service. On demand service here. So cloud computing, grid computing, and like these IT services are based on this platform mostly, like your utility computing. So this utility computing makes the cloud here an on-demand service. That means according to this model here. So here in this cloud computing technologies, we have covered virtualization, SOA, which is your service-oriented architecture, then grid computing, and then cloud computing. So these are the technologies here which makes the cloud computing a flexible, scalable, and usable technology here. Like with the help of virtualization, it allows you to create various multiple instances which could be shared here by multiple tenants here. After that, service-oriented architecture, which allows us to use the various applications as services. Then we have the concept of grid computing, which is basically a distributed computing models. After that, we have it's not cloud, it's the utility computing, which is here based on the pay-per-use model. That means you are provided the various computational resources, and then according to that, you are charged here. So in this class, we have just here started about the various cloud computing enabling technologies. So this is all here for today's class. Thank you so much.